Hello, everyone. It's Thursday, the 14th of November, 2024. And I'm just going to keep out these videos. I'm going to go on a little bit of not a rant, but I'm going to talk about different topics before I get into these very interesting videos that I want to share. But I want to talk about Decode Your Reality. He's very interesting. I've shared some of his stuff before because he's very smart, and he gives like a very refreshing perspective to this reality and what he believes it to be. And I don't necessarily agree with everything he shares, but but there's a lot there that I do find very interesting. I was just I haven't watched the whole video yet, but it's regarding Trump and the number 47. And he hasn't mentioned yet the whole 45th president and 47th president, which you've got the 9 and the 11. And and so there's that. And then when he was talking about the date that he was officially declared the winner for the presidency, he was saying he was looking at 6/11, so the 6th of November, and he's seeing it as the 11th month. And most people do, and for the most part, he's not wrong. But when he's decoding based off of occult groups that utilize certain dates, and times for their staged and planned events or their selections, they look at a different calendar system, and some look at a lunar system, and some look at the solar system. Where March 20th, on or around that period, the spring solstice is when, in March essentially is the start of the new year, and then even in the name November, it's correlated with the number 9, and so that's where I get the 6996. So you've got with the Freemasons and other groups like the Skull and Bones, for example, that Freemasons with the 33 degrees, so 6, you've got the 3 and the 3, and then 6 and 9, this is the yin and yang. This is possible duality that, again, it is a significant number in occult groups. So I'd be focusing more on the 6996 versus the 611, but that's just me. That's not my area of expertise. I do try to make predictions, and sometimes I'm accurate. But anyway, I was talking about game theory yesterday, and more towards the end of my video. It was a very interesting video. They mentioned prisoner's dilemma a lot, and so I did want to share that today as a follow-up because it's very important as well. I've talked about the Stanford prison experiments, Universe 25, multiple different behavioral experiments that have been done, including talking at length about MK Ultra and what kind of behavioral therapies and electroshock therapy and drug therapies were utilized. And arguably torture as well. But I haven't really talked about prisoner dilemma in a while, at least from what I can recall. So let's just see what.
Hello, everyone.
And so today's going to be basically all about him because the reason why I fell onto his channel is because even with the JFK assassinations, there's a lot of information that's been declassified, unclassified, and like the more research that's done, like the more involvement of very provably, but the deep state, how involved they were and who they were associated with. And Oliver Stone, he does get a lot of things correct, but there are things that he shares in his movies or his documentaries, whatever you want to call them, both of them, because he did JFK and then he did JFK Revisited, and I've shared that on videos. And I was even saying then that this is not entirely accurate, but it's anyway. And so this guy makes some very interesting claims that can be backed up by research and data. But again, until everything is declassified and unclassified regarding it, we're really not going to know the whole truth.
Position here. Today's video will be entitled Mind Games.
Mind games first.
Parentheses, prisoner dilemma games, end paren. All right. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the world in which we live in on the Let It Be album of the Beatles, sung by, who knows, the Paul McCartney clone, perhaps. Anyway, the world in which we live in was the title song to
actually about that, I'm gonna have to call out J Dreamers right now, because I've had multiple accounts on YouTube, and there has been a time, but it's been over a year that I can recall, that I've donated to his channel, but I've never had a monthly subscription, any of that stuff. And I believe that, and I have for a few months with certain people, but I've always canceled them. And so I have verified and confirmed that I have not had a subscription or any weird donation that I've put in place for, again, like well over a year. And for some reason, like there was a charge on my credit card, and it's a newer credit card too. So so that's also suspicious. And it was taken out of my account yesterday. This is like $20, and it may not seem like a lot, but it's a lot to me. And it's annoying because I don't want to cancel my credit card because of this charge. But I literally looked at all my Google subscriptions and my everything yesterday, or like last night, and because it's a bogus charge, and so like I don't know what his company is doing, but that to me is theft. And so like I'm going to recommend that people don't donate or do any subscriptions with J Dreamers, because even if you cancel even within the last couple of years and have your credit card changed, the information, his company is able to still steal money off of people. It's bullshit. Anyway, on with Mind Games.
James Bond, Live and Let Die. Live and let die. All right. So wanted to set the record straight on some of the minutia that we have in our fake history. Okay. So whilst the Beatles Psychops was being rolled out in London, England by the Tavistock Institute, EMI, and the corporate owners of EMI, which would be RCA and Columbia Broadcasting Systems and others, to promote social anthropology messages for the young generation, the next generation. All right. In New York and in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and in Manhattan, and in the Bronx, and in Yonkers, and out in California way, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Studio City, San Fernando Valley, we had similar operations going on concurrently, simultaneously, and congruently, because whoever was running the operations in Hollywood and in San Francisco and in Mendocino County at the Greenfield Ranch and the Rainbow Colony were the same people who were running the operations in Manhattan, New York, Bronx, Fordham University, Yonkers, and merry old England in London, as well as in India. When I say India, I mean British India. I mean the East India Company is what I'm talking about. Colonialism, mind games. Mind games are very important to befuddle, confuse, helter-skelter chaos, the sheeple, so that the sheep can be just led around in a state of drunkenness, in a Svengali trance, where they think they know things when they are clueless. They're clueless to the Masonic numerology. They're clueless to the Masonic triangle shapes, to the figures, to the empty shoes, to the little boy with the dripping boot, which means the job is done or almost done. If there's still water dripping out of the boot, it means it's almost not quite done. The Masonic symbols are everywhere. They're all around us. And I myself was clueless to virtually all of it for most of my life. So I understand how easy it is to get punked, to be psyched out. That's what we used to call it in the 60s in my neighborhood. When we could get someone to believe something that was false, we would say, psyched, and we would point at the person, knowing that they were punked. This was to advise them that they should realize it was a practical joke and we were just kidding. In our society today, the media doesn't tell you that they're punking you. They don't scream out the word psych and point to you. They don't do that. They want you to think that you should continue to believe and play their mind game. All right, so there's a number of things going on, and draw strong parallels between the Rolling Stones and the Beatles in London, England, and what was going on really with Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And if you follow those two clowns, two military intelligence officers, Timothy Leary, went to West Point and was a cadet along the Hudson River at West Point, which I believe is on the west side of the Hudson River. Anyway, you should know that Timothy Leary went to University of California, Berkeley to get his PhD in psychology. Richard Alpert went to Stanford University in Palo Alto, where all the private bankers now are, where the Department of Energy has a linear accelerator, and where they have SRI, Stanford Research Institute, collecting hundreds of millions of dollars in military funding to conduct all manner of games. prisoner dilemma game being one of the games that they promote at Stanford, amongst other universities. Anyway, Timothy Leary, the LSD maven, was granted a PhD doctorate from UC Berkeley. Richard Alpert received his PhD from Stanford University. And then they ended up back in Cambridge. Richard Alpert went to Harvard in 1953 to begin his career as a lecturer professor, and Timothy Leary joined him in 1959. Then they became teamed up through what was called the Harvard Psilocybin Project, HPP. This is a project that recruited students of Harvard as well as people off campus. Experiments performed in a Victorian home near the Botanical Garden, near the campuses of Harvard, but not on the campus, where they used LSD, mushroom, and electroshock therapies upon young people who allegedly volunteered. One of those people was Ted Kaczynski, who later received a PhD from University of California, Berkeley, after graduating from Harvard University in mathematics. Ted Kaczynski, and I believe he was required to participate in the psilocybin project in order to get his scholarship paid for at Harvard, where he didn't have to pay any money. And he shows up at Harvard University at age 16 without a driver's license, and he graduates from Harvard in 4 years. And he graduates right at the time that Abigail Folger arrives at Cambridge to go to Radcliffe, which shares the campus with Harvard. And then during the time that Abigail was attending Radcliffe, they changed the name to, called it Harvard Radcliffe, or Radcliffe Harvard. Anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is that Ted Kaczynski, Timothy Leary, Richard Alpert, and Abigail Folger all were at Harvard University at the same time in 1960, 61, 62. They were all there. 1963, April 1963, Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary were fired. They didn't call it a firing, but they were fired around April 30th, 1963, before the John Kennedy assassination for reasons that are untrue. They said that Harvard thought that they were tardy to class and were unreliable, going to department head meetings, et cetera, when the reality is they French fried one of the wealthy benefactors' children, and so they had to do away with them. They immediately got jobs at the Millbrook Institute, which they renamed the Castilia Institute, again on the Hudson River, at the Hudson River Valley, on 2,600 acres of property at the Hitchcock Estate. It's a series of horse farms that were consolidated by the military intelligence and disguised as a horse farm, where Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, from immediately getting fired at Harvard in April, reappear in New York on the Hudson River Valley in May 1963, where they are performing experiments with LSD, mushrooms, and electroshock treatments on a horse farm. So nothing changed. They didn't even have a hiccup. Don't know how long they were there. One of the legendary rumors is that G. Gordon Liddy arrived when he was a sheriff's deputy for the Dutchess County there, and he arrested Timothy Leary, but it didn't last long, because the next we hear is Timothy Leary appears in Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco, with officer housing in the Presidio Army Base, which is where Dianne Feinstein lives. She lives at 30 Presidio Terrace. This is also where Nancy Pelosi and Paul Pelosi, who are raising 5 children, they are living in Presidio Heights before they move to Pacific Heights. There's a short distinction. Pacific Heights is a little more expensive with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge, and Presidio Heights does not have that view, but it's only about 1.25 miles away from the other enclave. And Dianne Feinstein also moved over to be the last home on a dead-end cul-de-sac of Broadway at 2990 Broadway, next door to Gordon Getty and his complex of mansions on Broadway. Anyway, so Timothy Leary basically goes from UC Berkeley to Harvard University, and then he goes to Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco, Presidio Army Base, and along follows Richard Alpert from Stanford University. These two knuckleheads become the godfather to Winona Ryder, whose real name is Laura Horowitz, a little Jewish girl, and she's living at the Rainbow Colony in Mendocino County, next door to the Greenfield Ranch, which is where Jim Jones gets to have free housing for his People's Temple, Rainbow Open Coalition Church. He also has the Scottish Rites Temple Auditorium at 1849 Geary Boulevard, which shares a wall with the Fillmore Auditorium, where Bill Graham gets to take over the lease after George Sullivan is murdered in the San Francisco Port Authority. August 2nd, 1966. This is setting up for the Summer of Love. You should know, people, everything with the military intelligence community, aka CIA, Navy intelligence, Army intelligence, Air Force, is beta tested before it's rolled out on a massive scale. Like COVID was, like the COVID hoax was, like the safe and effective vax was. They do lots of testing on these products with animals and with people in private. Private means
Animals.
secret, none of your business, nothing to see here. And so just so you know, the Summer of Love was officially the summer of 1967, but you should know they had miniature free concerts in 1966 and probably other places all across the world. It wasn't just in San Francisco. And they weren't called the Summer of Love. They had other names. You should know that after Timothy Leary and Richard Albert left the Millbrook Institute, on or around 1964, 65, when they went out to San Francisco to do the machinations of mendacity out there, their Castilia Institute was closed and shuttered, but it was immediately taken over by a guy named Gene Liken, spelled Liken, and he was researching acid rain. And he had the Institute of Ecosystem Studies, kind of like Dr. Fauci's, money laundering facility. The they have all these eco straw companies for military intelligence. And I would guess that the funders of acid rain would probably be the military, right? Because when they do the chemtrail dumpings on a day that's raining, that is acid rain, people. That's full of radioactive particulates, aka smart dust, aka metamaterials. And I consider that to be acid rain when it rains today. It's all full of the metamaterials. But they were researching that back in 1964, 65, 66 at the Hudson River Valley Millbrook Institute, then known the Institute of Ecosystem Studies by Gene Liken. That's who replaced Timothy Leary and Richard Albert. We all know that G. Gordon Liddy went on to possibly be participating with the John Kennedy assassination in Dallas. And it's rumored that he's the one that assassinated Officer Tippit. J.D. Tippit was put down. He was the taxi driver, I believe, for Lee Oswald, the scapegoat. And so you take out the taxi driver, right? It's like Paul Stein of the Zodiac killings at the Presidio Army Base in San Francisco at the corner of Cherry and Washington Streets, 1 block from Dianne Feinstein's house. They took out the taxi driver, Paul Stein, age 29. Well, they took out the taxi driver, J.D. Tippit, in the Cliff, what's it called? The South Cliff area, White Cliff area of South Dallas, Texas. And possibly G. Gordon Liddy had something to do with that. He was also busted as a burglar for the Watergate scandal, which was all CIA crew. Complete crew, 100% CIA people. I would guess you'd call that a CIA burglary, right? Burglaries, because it's more than one burglary, but we only talk about one burglary, even though there's probably quite a few other burglaries that we don't discuss. Anyway, getting back to San Francisco, in 1965, we had Ken Kesey, we had Allen Ginsberg, we had Dr. Albert Laverne performing lobotomies on people at the Bellevue State Hospital in Manhattan, New York, and poaching students at Fordham University in the Bronx. One of the students that Dr. Albert Laverne poached murdered his wife, Paula Passavant, in his Fifth Avenue apartment across the street from Central Park. His wife was murdered in front of his 3 children in the lobby of his expensive apartment building by a student from Fordham University. Hey, that's a Jesuit school, Fordham. Looks like we got UC Berkeley in the story, Stanford University in the story, Harvard University in the story, Fordham University in the story that involves MK Ultra psychiatrists who practice Operation Artichoke, which is about interrogation, Operation Monarch, which is about trauma-based conditioning of the mind, and psilocybin, LSD, electroshock treatments, all these knuckleheads, including Louis Jolion West, who killed a 3,000-pound elephant at the Oklahoma City Zoo and came out of the United States Air Force, along with Hunter S. Thompson, who also were dispatched to Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco. So you got Hunter S. Thompson, MK Ultra psychiatrist, medical doctor Louis Jolion West, Timothy Leary, Dr. Richard Albert, who goes on to become a yogi guru and godfather to Winona Ryder, Laura Horowitz. And they're all working with Abigail Folger's mother, Enos Mejia, at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, along with Paul Stein, the yellow cab driver who got shot in the head by a 9mm. He lives across the street. He lives across the street from the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. You know where Patricia Hearst had a home at 1235 Masonic Avenue. You got the Grateful Dead there. You got Jerry Garcia there. Later, you had Patty Hearst living there. You got George Harrison living there. Ravi Shankar living there. Janis Joplin. You got the whole crew. Yoko Ono and John Lennon come later. They have a bed in for peace in Montreal, Canada. and Timothy Leary joins and visits them there in Quebec, Canada.
Huh?
Timothy Leary of the Psilocybin
More Montreal
Project at
connections.
Harvard, LSD, mushrooms, electroshock treatment. Meanwhile, in Stanford University, they collect money from the United States Navy, and they put on what is called the prisoner dilemma game. Okay, Stanford Prisoner Experiment is what it was known for. SPE was the acronym the military Navy gave it. SPE, I call that a special purpose entity, but Stanford calls it a prison experiment. Stanford Prison Experiment was a study of psychological effect of becoming a prisoner or a prison guard. All right, they test out the psychology mind game of the guard versus the prisoner, and then they pit the prisoners against each other. I know a little bit about this. In fact, I'd say I know a lot about it. If you've never been incarcerated, never been in solitary confinement, you don't know what I'm talking about, okay? But you can crack a walnut in a solitary confinement situation. Ron DeSantis knows all about this. He used to pretend to be a defense lawyer for the Office of Judge Advocacy at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and at Fallujah, Iraq, where he pretended to represent the Geneva Convention rights of prisoners kept in cages and in solitary isolation cells while working with a BISCIT team. BISCIT is a military acronym which stands for Behavioral Science Consulting Team. That makes sure that when you're administering enemas or force feeding to your prisoner, that they won't die, their heart won't stop, that you're there ready to intervene if you should have a heart attack or a stroke. And this is the team that Ron DeSantis would work with. And this is what they do at SRI, although I understand that initially in 1971, the prisoner dilemma game, which they call the Stanford Prison Experiment, was conducted in the basement of the building for psychology on the campus for Stanford, which is not SRI. I want to distinguish. Stanford University is on a sprawling 4,000 plus acre campus beside private bankers and a linear accelerator on Sand Hill Road. SRI, Stanford Research Institute, is located about 2 miles to the northeast in Menlo Park. And it's over there where the founders of Google, rented the garage from the department head of physics at Stanford, who's Jewish. Anyway, I believe they do prisoner dilemma games at both locations. I believe they do them in Menlo Park, and I believe they do them in Palo Alto on the main campus. But be that as it may, it doesn't matter. The point is that Stanford University collects money from the United States Office of Navy Research and the Marine Corps and the Marines to conduct studies upon students who are put into role play as prisoners or prison guards. Anyway, I'll provide a link below. I don't want to get into it. The whole thing is beyond perverted, and this tells you everything you need to know about Stanford University and why Elizabeth Holmes would come out of there and why George Shultz would be at the Hoover Institute and why Victor Davis Hanson would work for the Hoover Institute amongst the Scripps Institute. He's not a farmer. He's a paid anthropologist shill for the military intelligence.
I'm going to get to Prisoner's Dilemma because he hasn't got, no offense to him, he's sharing really good information, but he has not got to it yet. Oh my God. Oh my God. Anyways, Prisoner's Dilemma. I haven't watched this one yet. I'm hoping they get to it.
Mr. Blue and Miss Red have each been arrested for some minor crime. The police think they committed a more serious crime, but they don't have enough evidence to convict them. They need a confession. They take them and put them in separate rooms so they can't talk and play a little game. To try to force a confession, the police give them each a choice. Admit your partner committed the crime and you will go free. We'll pardon you for the minor crime, but your partner will have to spend 3 years in prison. If you stay silent and your partner lets us know that you were the one who really did it, then you're going to have to go away for 3 years. They know that the police don't have any evidence, and if they both stay silent, then they will only go to prison 1 year each for the minor crime. If they both betray each other, then they'll both go to prison for 2 years each. Okay, each partner can do one of two things: stay silent or betray. Staying silent would be cooperating, and betraying would be defecting. If they both stay silent, then they each spend a year in prison. If one betrays and the other stays silent, then the betrayer goes free and the silent spends 3 years in prison. If they both betray, then it's 2 years each. So what are they going to do? Well, they should cooperate. That's the best option for the group if we add the total number of years in prison. But let's take it from Red's perspective. If she thinks Blue is going to stay silent, then she should betray so she can go free. Going free is better than spending a year in prison. If she thinks he's going to betray her, then she should definitely betray. 2 years in jail is better than 3 and being made a fool of. Blue is in the exact same situation and will think the exact same thing. He should betray if she stays silent, and he should betray if she betrays. They should have both both cooperated, but from an individual standpoint, they notice they could always gain by defecting if they have no control over what the other person's going to do. So they'll both defect to try to better their own situation, but come away not only hurting the group, but themselves. Individually, they're worse off than if they both cooperated. This situation is pretty made up, but it has some real-world analogs. A common example is with marketing. Let's say two cigarette companies, Red Strikes and Smooth Blue, are deciding how much money they should spend on advertising. Since the product they each make is identical to one another, advertising has a huge impact on sales. For simplicity, let's say their choices are to advertise a bunch or not advertise at all. And there's just 100 people in the society and they all smoke. If both don't advertise, then just by random chance picking cigarette boxes, 50 people buy Red Strikes and 50 people buy Smooth Blue. At $2 a pack, they each make $100. Let's say advertising costs $30. If one person advertises and the other does not, then 80 people will buy the cigarettes from the ads and 20 people buy the other ones. The advertiser makes $160 minus $30 for ads and comes away with $130. The non-advertiser didn't spend any money but only made $40. If they both advertise, again, half will buy Red Strikes and half will buy Smooth Blue. But since they both spent $30 on advertising, they only come away with $70 each. Same deal, both people cooperating and not advertising is the most preferable situation, but both companies can see that advertising will always make them more money. But unlike the prisoners in jail, these companies can talk and try to influence each other. From here, Blue would be better off if Red didn't advertise. Red wouldn't go for that because that would be worse for them. Blue could try to convince Red that they would both not advertise, the only other situation where they're both better off. But without any real obligation to each other, there's nothing that's stopping them from trying to advertise to gain more of the market anyway. If you think your opponent's going to not advertise, then you're better off advertising. Although we're still making assumptions to make this situation work too. With this model, we're assuming they only play once. The game changes when the players have a chance to build a relationship and work together to get more gains over time, or punish each other by not cooperating. Also, to make the model work, we have to make up rules for the players. Assume they're basically computer programs with predictable actions. These guys are creepier than they were in my head. They were supposed to be cute. For the prisoner's dilemma and other similar models, we're assuming they are rational agents. A rational agent is a hypothetical person that will always pick the option that they predict will work out best for them. They're not really thinking about the gains of someone else. Seems selfish, but it is something that real people generally do too. People always want what's best for themselves, and we don't like to be made a fool of. But if you put real people in the prisoner's dilemma, people don't always defect like the model predicts. In one study, 40 people playing prisoner's dilemma games through a computer without ever meeting or talking, only playing each opponent once, these are one-off games, using a payoff matrix that looks like this, cooperated an average of 22% of the time. These people never cooperated. These people always cooperated. These guys cooperated on half of their games and everyone else is in between. This is a lot of cooperation coming from a model that predicts no cooperation. The largest group did act like rational agents, but most people tried to cooperate at least once. It's because, well, there's more to real people. We are social creatures, and even in one-off scenarios with no guarantees or obligations and no chance to build a relationship, we're still thinking about how the group might decide. We're actually thinking from the perspective of the group and making an optimistic decision. Cooperating an average of 20% of the time might not seem very optimistic, but remember this is with absolutely no communication or obligations. Anyways, that's not really the point. Using rational agents is still useful. The model is just trying to point out the dilemma of certain situations where people are actually hurting themselves when counterintuitively they're only thinking about themselves. And that's why we're modeling using the cold robotic psychopaths.
Nope. Okay, that was a joke. Okay, on with the next one. Prisoner's dilemma. Very interesting. And so cooperation still ideal in this game of life included. Okay, so who was the friggin' one that this guy juxtaposition or whatever his name is? Was it this one? I'll share this one.
Fake book authors. I'm talking about fake referring. Timothy.
Okay, here we go.
Hello, everyone. Juxtaposition here. Today's video will be entitled Oliver Stone, comma, Mark Lane, comma, Timothy Leary, comma, Larry Flint, comma, CIA clowns, comma, et al. All right. What am I referring to, you ask? Well, I'm referring to
Yeah,
the
this one.
influencers, the social engineers, the NATO soldiers for bank anthropology, which have guided the matrix of mendacity. I'm talking about fake book authors. I'm talking about fake filmmakers, AKA directors, producers, screenwriters. I'm talking about pornographers. I'm talking about LSD mavens, Timothy Leary, tune in, turn on, drop out. I'm talking about Cielo Drive, and I'm also talking about Sunbrook Drive.
Mm.
Sunbrook Drive. Yes, where Timothy Leary had a home, and Oliver Stone visited him there on St. Patrick's Day, 1996, March 17th. I believe that was a Sunday. Just below the ice plant from where Abigail Folger was bayoneted on the lawn 28 times to death. There's Oliver Silverstein Stone. There's Timothy Leary. There's a Jew and a Roman Catholic. Just below Abigail Folger, who was a Roman Catholic, and Sharon Tate, who was a Roman Catholic. They partner the Jews with the Catholics. Very common. Okay, so the first spoiler alert I got to tell you is it's hard for me to tell the story when everybody changes their name. So Oliver Stone, that's not his real name. His name is William Oliver Silverstein Stone. You see, because Oliver Stone's father was born Louis Silverstein, right? So we got Louis Silverstein, who was Jewish, and he married a French-born mother, a French-born wife, whose name was Nigadek, Jacqueline Nigadek. Jacqueline got it. So she's French Roman Catholic. And Oliver Stone was raised in the Episcopal Church, but of course today he is a practicing Buddhist. That makes sense, right? So you have a Jewish father, a Roman Catholic mother, born in France. You're raised in the Episcopal Church, and none of those religions stick. So you convert to Buddhism, which you probably picked up on when you worked for the CIA in Saigon, when Oliver Silverstein Stone was teaching English to the children of military contractors at the, let's see, where did he teach that? It's just a funny story, little footnote, that I'm to believe that Oliver Stone, who's really William Silverstein, that he dropped out of Yale University to travel all the way around the world to Saigon, which today is called Ho Chi Minh City, to teach high school students English for 6 months at the Free Pacific Institute in South Vietnam. I'm going to bet you dollars to donuts that the Free Pacific Institute is a CIA fake name to a school for the children of the contractors, you know, that work for Halliburton, Bechtel, that work for General Dynamics, Bell Helicopters, Monsanto, Dow Chemical, who taught the South Vietnamese army how to do torture techniques and how to properly use the M7 bayonet to go into hamlets such as My Lai and bayonet pregnant women, just like was done on Cielo Drive, which Oliver Stone is very familiar with because he went over to give a get well card to Timothy Leary, Mr. Tune In, Turn On, Drop Out, LSD Maven, Timothy Leary, a Roman Catholic, who was living at 10106 Sunbrook Drive. And on March 17, 1996, Oliver Stone drove, presumably from Brentwood, where he lives next to O.J. Simpson in Mendeville Canyon. He drove over to 10106 Sunbrook Drive, which is 30 seconds down the ice plant from where Abigail Folger was bayoneted 28 times to death, and Sharon Tate was bayoneted 16 times to death, and they're both Roman Catholics. Sharon Tate is Catholic, buried in the Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City. Abigail Folger is Roman Catholic. She's buried in the Holy Cross Cemetery in Colma, San Francisco, South San Francisco, Colma. All right. And Oliver Silverstein is very acquainted with the property because he went over to perform a ritual of his own where he visited with Timothy Leary on March 17th, 1996, just 2 months before Timothy Leary passed away, and his death was videotaped. That's very ritualistic, people. I wonder if Oliver Stone's visit with Timothy Leary on St. Patrick's Day, a day that is not normally celebrated by Buddhists or Jews. It's only celebrated by Catholics. But anyway, be that as it may, there's Oliver Silverstein Stone in Benedict Canyon at a murder scene of 5 people. And, Oliver Stone doesn't talk about it. He doesn't talk about his relationship with Andrew Vachna, who goes by Andres Weidman, or Mario Casar, or Noam Bloom, or Jose Menendez. I mean, Jose Menendez was in the porn business and worked with Oliver Stone's partners at Carolco Pictures, in Van Nuys, in Canoga Park, in Woodland Hills, and on Hollywood Boulevard or Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood. They had offices at all those locations. On Sunset Boulevard, they had offices in Van Nuys and Woodland Hills and Canoga Park, which are porn addresses. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is that the reason I started and kicked off with Oliver Stone is because he was the replacement, effectively, for the JFK cover-up from Mark Lane. And that's not Mark Lane's real name either, right? Just like Oliver Stone is William Silverstein, Mark Lane is Mark Levin, because Mark Levin's father was named Levin. See, they changed their names and they just try to confound me because I'm just trying to tell you the truth. Mark Levin was born in the Bronx, a borough of New York, of course. It's where Fordham University Catholic Jesuit School is, and a high concentration of Jewish people live along the Bronx River there, near Fordham University. So again, Catholics and Jews go together, just like Oliver Stone and Timothy Leary go together. So does Mark Levin Lane and William F. Buckley. So does he with the Bronx and Fordham University. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is Mark Levin Lane was born in the Bronx, but he was raised in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn, of course, is home to Anthony Fauci. It's home to Chuck Charles Schumer. It's home to Woody Allen. It's home to Jewish psychiatrist Louis Jolyon West, who killed a 3,000-pound elephant at the Oklahoma City Zoo, and then went on to counsel the Jonestown survivors. There were 33 Jonestown survivors. It's a Masonic number, right? So Mark Levin Lane, let me read you a little bit about this fake book author. So he was born February 24th, 1927. And he's known as an American attorney, a New York State legislator, a civil rights activist, and a Vietnam war crimes investigator. He's sometimes referred to as a gadfly, also known as a Debbie Downer, someone that doesn't accept the official mainstream media narrative. Lane is best known as a leading researcher, author, and conspiracy theorist on the assassination of U.S. President John F. Kennedy. Mark Lane has authored 10 books on the JFK assassination, which include Rush to Judgment, which was released in August 1966. It became a #1 best-selling critique of the Warren Commission, also known as the Warren Report. Mark Lane was born in the Bronx, New York, but he was raised in Brooklyn. He served in the United States Army during World War II, 1945, 1946. So he's just caught the tail end, and he was eventually stationed in Austria, home to many Jewish people. Austria. Anyway, Mark Levin Lane attended Long Island University, where he received a bachelor degree, and then he went to the Brooklyn Law School and graduated in 1951. Became a lawyer. He became an assistant on the National Lawyers Guild, which is maritime law, and he orchestrated fundraising events in the town hall of New York City that featured folk singer Pete Seeger, whoever that is. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is that, just a moment, Mark Lane became a partner in a law firm in East Harlem known as the Seymour Ostrich Law Firm. Although Mark Lane acquired a reputation as a defender of the poor and the oppressed, his partner, Seymour Ostro, asserted that Mark Lane was more motivated by his personal ambition and quest for publicity than any dedication to the cause or concern.
Sorry, there was just a guess, so not a guess, but a comment regarding JFK's assassination and possible involvement of people from certain specific, see, some people call them religious groups or organizations, like I'm talking about Jewish, and some people believe that they are their own race or ethnicity, whatever you want to call it. And Ben Shapiro even says it as well. So maybe I'll just, but I'm guessing he's gonna, I don't know if you already mentioned it, but Jack Ruby is also, like, his real name is Jacob Rubenstein. And so he is he's not calling out, but he is just like letting people be aware of these connections. So I think he's like not calling it out, but sharing who's involved. And it just so happens that they start to be, they just so happens that they are a large percentage of, but it's not even just the Jewish community, but it's also Catholics. It's also people that are Satanists, people that are part of occult groups and they don't believe in religion. There's Scientologists and whatever you want to call it as well. Obviously that this stuff predates the big push on Scientology, but he does get into it. I was going to share this video. I'll keep on playing it, and then I want to share what Ben Shapiro says.
About the clients at their firm. Their partnership was dissolved, divorced in the late 1950s. But of course, then we had 1959, Mark Lane helped fund the Reform Democratic movement within the New York Democratic Party. This later was where Abigail Folger was inserted to be part of the Robert Kennedy presidential campaign in Manhattan. But before Abigail Folger, when she was...
Okay, so I found it.
Individuals don't believe that individuals ought to be represented based on group identity. So, for example, I'm Jewish. Jews are actually overrepresented in Congress. I don't think that we ought to decide exactly how many people in Congress are Jewish based on the Jewish population of the country. I think that's actually a pretty silly way to do representation.
Well, we don't have to do it systematically, but fundamentally, there is an issue with the fact that we are not fully represented. Like, the entire population is not represented. We have never had a black female president. I still have to pay taxes.
We've never had
The whole concept is no taxation without. Well, we have had a white male president. We've had like 45 of them.
Whether Jews count as white or not has been sort of an object of debate.
That's such a poor argument. When again you look at the demographics and the breakdown of the U.S. throughout its recent history, at least the last couple hundred years, and like they're not making these same arguments based on other friggin' countries like China. Like I'm fairly certain they've had Chinese presidents of a certain Chinese, I'll say, and people are not complaining about that. Like you've got like multiple countries in Africa where it's been black leaders for many years. No one's complaining about. Anyways, why here?
You do.
We are literally living in an age or an era where women in what we're considering to be first world countries, not first world countries, but where they are the most entitled and privileged they've ever been. 2024 especially, literally the most entitled, privileged group of women that has ever existed, and they seem to be the ones that are complaining the most about the silliest things that actually don't even matter in the real world, which is, anyway, they're in a bit of a bubble, I'll say. Not their fault, but it's their obligation or responsibility to further educate themselves at this point.
do. Okay.
You do.
So, I mean, it depends according to whom, and that's a pretty recent development. Okay, so
Basically everyone. It's a religion.
Judaism.
Do
is
you
also
not
ethnicity.
agree that you are a white man?
I mean, I think that it depends on the context in which we're discussing it.
So
Meaning
what
that-
are you, Ben? Are you not a white guy?
I mean, I'm a man
Are
of
you-
Jewish ethnicity, which is sometimes grouped with white and sometimes not. I mean, that's the more accurate way to put it. But when
What
we're
else would
talking
you be
about
grouped with?
with Jews, who are which is an
But it's-
ethnicity, I mean,
So
yeah.
you're not white at all.
I mean, again, it depends who's doing the grouping and how. I've seen Jews grouped with white and Jews grouped with not white. Are we just pretending that doesn't exist? That's a reality. However, as far as your generalized point, which is that we are supposed to identify people by group identity, that we don't have a black female president.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So he doesn't consider it to be a religion. He considers it to be an ethnicity. He's free to think however he wants. Not a crime.
Matriculated at Harvard and Radcliffe in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Mark Lane was working at the New York Democratic Party. And he also was involved with the New York legislature in 1960. During his own political campaign, he managed New York City's campaign for the John Kennedy 1960s presidential bid. He claims to be part of JFK's presidential campaign in New York County, 10th District. Then I'm going to fast forward. We had the assassination of John Kennedy, okay, which was then covered up by Lyndon Baines Johnson's appointment of the Earl Warren Chief Justice Warren Commission, which was overseen by Allen Dulles, who had been fired or dismissed by JFK as the CIA director. So what could possibly go wrong with the Warren report, right? Except everything. There's actually a lot of really great pearls and gems in the Warren report. There really is, if you read the testimony. Now, the testimony is all tape on, tape off. All the testimony in the Warren Commission's 552 witnesses was done in private, in secret, behind locked doors. There was only one witness of the 552 witnesses who testified in an open air, empty theater. And that person was Mark Levin Lane. Mark Lane, he specifically said he wanted his testimony to be taken in a public forum. The problem is nobody attended that forum and no one read the Mark Lane testimony. And it doesn't matter because Mark Lane was not present in Dallas when John Kennedy had his head blown off, and he didn't witness anything. So he's just injecting himself because they're going to set him up to write the book, Rush to Judgment, which was distributed after August 1966, where Mark Lane becomes a fake book author. Because I'm very confident that Mark Levin Lane did not author that book. It was written by the CIA, and he just put his name on it. And then, of course, immediately upon the release of that book, quick like a bunny rabbit, Mark Levin Lane is booked to appear on Firing Line with William F. Buckley. And that appearance was December 1st, 1966. So we had September, October, and November. 90 days go by, and the book is released. It's in bookstores. And to promote the sale of Rush to Judgment, we have William F. Buckley, a member of Skull and Bones, an alumni of Yale University, and an employee of the CIA stationed at the State Department Embassy in Mexico City. And you should know, of course, that William F. Buckley's supervisor in Mexico City was none other than E. Howard Hunt. E. Howard Hunt, who also appears on Firing Line after the Watergate burglary situation. And E. Howard Hunt is implicated as being the White House operative who coordinated the burglars in this called Black Bag operation. Black Bag means you break into a home or office and install listening devices. You may take photographs of files, but for the most part, a black bag operation is a burglary, not to steal, but to install listening devices. That's dominantly what black bag operations are. It meets the definition of burglary because you're breaking into property without permission, right? And to commit a felony, to commit some kind of a crime. And I've got different lawyers telling me that even if you went to steal a glass of water, that would constitute a felony burglary. That was from a lawyer who I consider to be an imbecile. He's a Jewish lawyer who I would never believe ever.
Oh,
And he told me if you take a glass of water without permission that you're committing a burglary. He's a moron, okay? If you wanted to steal something or murder somebody, or you wanted to plant listening devices, that would rise to the level of felony burglary. All right. So anyway, Mark Levin Lane appears on the William Buckley show, and William Buckley is a CIA agent, and Mark Lane is a CIA operative, and they pretend to not get along, and William Buckley defends the Warren Commission, but admits he hadn't read it, and Mark Lane, I don't think Mark Lane's read the Warren Commission either, to tell you the truth, but he's got a book called Rush to Judgment, which takes odds with the conclusions. They don't really want to dispute the evidence. They don't get into the minutia. They just talk about the conclusions. And the conclusion is that Mark Levin Lane does not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone killed the president. He said more investigation is required. But nowhere in the appearance of Mark Lane on the William F. Buckley Firing Line Show episode, December 1st, 1966, nowhere in there does he talk about the Port Authority of Dallas. Nowhere does he talk about that George Dealey Plaza is a Masonic triangular park. Nowhere does he talk about the railroad tracks are part of Port Authority maritime law. Nowhere does he say that the snipers were positioned over Main Street on the railroad trestle. He doesn't say that. He doesn't talk about Philip Willis, a United States Army spy pilot. He doesn't mention his name. He doesn't mention Rosemary or Linda, the 14 and 9-year-old daughters of Philip Willis, who took many, many photographs standing at the corner of Dealey Plaza at Elm and Houston Street in a 360-degree pattern. Nowhere in the book, Rush to Judgment, nowhere in the episode on television, Firing Line with William Buckley, does Mark Levin Lane mention Philip Willis, a military spy pilot who's taking photographs directly across the street from Abraham Zapruder. Nowhere does Mark Levin Lane discuss Abraham Zapruder's partner in Jennifer Junior's in the Daltex building. He doesn't even mention that Abraham Zapruder is a 33-degree Mason and a Scottish Rites auditor. He doesn't mention that. He doesn't mention that his offices are in the 4th and 5th floor of the Daltex building, and that his partner, another Jewish man named Erwin Schwartz, was present for the John Kennedy assassination. He doesn't mention Erwin Schwartz's name. He doesn't mention the names of the secretaries of both the men. He doesn't mention that they were not alone, that they had a group of people with them. He doesn't mention anything like that. And neither does Oliver Silverstein Stone. He doesn't either. All Oliver Stone did 20 years later was to reposition the bogus story that Lee Oswald kneeling behind some books on the 6th floor of the School Book Depository building at 411 Elm Street. It's a Masonic number 6. That's a 33, 6. And the Daltex building is 501. That's a 6. That's a 33. So you got 33, 33 on both corners of the Masonic triangular northeast corner. You don't hear Oliver Stone mention that. You don't hear Mark Lane mention that, because you know what? They work for the CIA. That's why they're concealment artists. They don't want you to know that it's a Masonic military murder. They don't want you to know that the kill shots came from Main Street on the railroad trestle. So Oliver Stone tries to foist onto the clueless sheep that the kill shot came from the picket fence grassy knoll area. Poppycock. That's impossible. I've been there. The shooter would have killed Jackie Kennedy if he shot from that direction. No way, Daddy-O. The shots came head on, straight on from the front. That's Main Street. And you do know that Main Street, Elm Street, and Commerce Street, they all come together. It's the same location. And all three streets to the west, to the southwest of the railroad trestle becomes one street, Commerce. So Commerce Street is Commerce Street, Main Street is Commerce Street, Elm Street is Commerce Street. They all come together in a confluence at the pyramid tip The pyramid, the Masonic pyramid of George Dealey Plaza is at Main Street on the railroad trestle above Main Street. That's where the shooters were. And there were multiple shooters there. 2 pulled the trigger and shot. One time to John Kennedy's throat, his voice box.
Correct.
That's a Masonic, you talk too much. And then the second shot was to his right eye socket to blow his brains out the back with a flangeable bullet. 2 shots only. And those rifles were muzzled. They were silenced. They made no sounds. All the echoes that we talked about, the 3 shots, came from other directions and did not hit John Kennedy. That's done deliberately on purpose to create the illusion that shots came from different directions, which they did. But the kill shot for John Kennedy was muzzled and made no sound. And it was a shot to his neck and a shot to his eye socket. And you didn't get that from Oliver Silverstein Stone, and you didn't get that from Mark Levin Lane, perhaps because they're part of a.
They did, in his defense, he did share footage of the doctor's accounts of the entrance wound, and then covering it up, and then speaking about it afterwards, several years later or many years later, in some circumstances, admitting that there was an entrance wound in the throat, and the so much other stuff, like with the brain that was done, and like the misinformation that was shared, propaganda pieces on like his head, and brain being like fairly intact, skull fairly intact, and alleging there was only so there were things that he did mention.
A Jewish cult that may or may not practice Buddhism. All right. What else I got here? Larry Flint. Okay, so Larry Flint enters the story because we know that he's a pornographer who was involved with the production of Hustler magazine, which was a pornography magazine. They had articles such as Asshole of the Month. One of my personal friends was bestowed that honor. He was an Asshole of the Month, in one of the magazines for Larry Flint. But you should know, and this is very well hidden, people, that Larry Flint was basically partners with Mark Levin Lane. Yes, he was. If you go down the black hole that is the People's Temple.
Trump says he's going to release the information, and he said that in his last term as well. So we'll see. There's a lot of conflict of interest with his donors, and where they come from, and they are people that also would love to cover up the truth and the reality of his assassination and who was involved.
And Jones,
but it would be really nice.
Jonestown, you will learn these facts. All right, so they've been covering up the John Kennedy assassination for over 60 years now, and they every so often they have to sort of amp it up a little bit, just like they do with Sharon Tate, because that was a NATO killing, a Masonic military killing of Sharon Tate and Leno LaBianca and Abigail Folger. It was military, using military weapons, bayonets and AR-15 rifles. Then in the case of John Kennedy, same exact thing, NATO rifles, and it was a military Masonic killers killed John Kennedy. And that's true with Robert Kennedy as well. And it's probably true with Martin Luther King. And the reason you can tell that is that they use the same crisis actors to cover all of these events, to cover them up in the media. But in the case of Larry Flint, this is just too funny. So there's an FBI agent, former FBI agent, Wesley Swearington. And I'm going to come back to him because he's one of the partners of Mark Levin Lane as well. Anyway, so he's a former FBI agent, all right? And he gets put together with Mark Lane and Larry Flint. Larry Flint, the flamboyant publisher of Hustler magazine, he offered up $1 million reward for information leading to the capture and conviction of the John Fitzgerald Kennedy's killers. And they advertised a long-distance telephone number published in the Hustler magazine. And and their efforts to collect information that would lead to the conviction and arrest of the JFK killers. What they didn't tell you is when you call that number, it was being answered by Mark Levin Lane and Wesley Swearingen. Wesley Swearingen. So we have CIA operatives are going to answer the phone. That's a honeypot. See, that's what the Woodstock Festival was. That's what the Altamont Free Concert was. That's what the Monterey International Pop Festival was. Right? You create an anti-war peace music festival, and then you collect the information of the people who go there. That's what Richard Gage was to the 9/11 Truther movement, architects and engineers. He's a CIA operative. Richard Gage works for the CIA. I know that for a fact. Okay? So if you send your money to the architects and engineers, or you email it, they'll have your email, they'll have your personal address, they'll have your checking account number. They will have all this financial information on you, and they'll know that you don't believe the official narrative that airplanes knock down 3 buildings like bowling pins, right? And that's all brought to you by Richard Gage, who is an operative for the intelligence community in the same way that Mark Levin Lane was, because it's like Lay's potato chips. The problem with these operatives is they don't just do one gig, right? Richard Gage has implicated himself in numerous operations. Another is babysitting a Department of Energy chemist physicist until he died mysteriously of a heart attack. And that guy was a personal friend of mine. I will never forgive Richard Gage. If I ever see you, I will make your life very unpleasant. So if I was you, you want to give me a nice wide berth. Anyway, what I'm telling you is the 9/11 Truther movement is totally infiltrated by military intelligence. And that's a crime that was committed in a Port Authority of New York, World Trade Center. Okay? In other words, it's an inside job, obviously. The sinking of the USS Maine in the Port of Havana, that's an inside job. The Port of Havana is owned by military intelligence, not the Cubans, not the Spanish. Military intelligence, NATO forces. Now, back then in 1898, it was not called NATO, but it was the same people. It's military troops funded by Swiss banks. It's Switzerland. If you want me to pick a sources and uses of the money, it would be Switzerland. That's where the money comes from to kill Jack Kennedy. That's where the money comes from to blow up the World Trade Center. That's where the money comes from to blow up the USS Maine and to blow up Pearl Harbor. It comes from Switzerland. It does not come from Israel. Get that through your head, you people. Israel is a psyops. There is no such thing as a state of Israel. That's a psychological operation. Israel was created in a conference room in Geneva, Switzerland, or Basel, Switzerland, or Bern, Switzerland, or Zurich, Switzerland. It doesn't exist without a Swiss banking authority. It's a bank psyops. All right, so this character, Wesley Swearingen, is working with Mark Lane to basically honeypot people who don't believe the JFK narrative. And there you go. Now, Wesley Swearingen is involved with other projects, just like Richard Gage is involved with 9/11, and he's involved with babysitting chemistry PhDs who retire from the Lawrence Livermore Weapons Lab and are kind of chatty. And he makes sure that they don't leak out their security clearance secrets. You should also know that the Weather Underground, which is another military intelligence fake cult of far-left Marxist military organization, first known to be active in 1969 when Sharon Tate was killed. We had the Weather Underground. Well, Wesley Swearingen was involved with that, and he performed a black box burglary operation himself on a subunit of the Weather Underground, which was called the Tucson Five. The Tucson Five is a group of roommates that lived in Los Angeles, and the FBI broke into their home without a warrant, warrantless search, and installed listening devices. And then there was a lawsuit and an appeal, and a lot of embarrassing facts and circumstances came out which involved Wesley Swearington. In other words, it was a warrantless search, there was perjury, there was violation of attorney-client privileges, illegal wiretaps, and felony burglary. But I don't think anybody actually went to prison because it's all under military maritime law, and this is a military crime. So what I'm trying to tell you is Mark Levin Lane is working side by side with Wesley Swearington, who conducts felony burglaries, installs listening devices, commits perjury, and these guys are partners. What does that say about Oliver Stone, a practicing Buddhist? It pretty much means, I mean, I already know that Oliver Stone works hand in hand with Mario Kassar and Andrew Vajna, and they're in the porn business. They're in the porn industry, or they were. That business has all been transferred over to Lionsgate through Artisan Pictures and Cabrera Home Video and Noel Bloom. And you should know that the Mormon Church is in the porn business because they have interest in Bain Capital, and Bain Capital owns Artisan Pictures, which is part of Lionsgate, which is in the pornography business. So it just shows you the hypocrisy of the Mormon Church, the LDS. They're in businesses that they politically say that they're against. Like they're in steroid sports, BYU football, Cougar football, and they promote Steve Young, a quarterback in the NFL, who's an LDS member. He's a doper, right? Andy Reid, who just recently won a Masonic Super Bowl in Las Vegas at 3333 Al Davis Way. He's on steroids, or all his players are, and he was when he played football for Brigham Young University. Andy Reid played football at Brigham Young University. Brigham Young, a man with 56 wives and 57 children, Brigham Young. That's hypocrisy of LDS. They have so much to keep them busy with sex crimes. They don't need to worry about me. Anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is Larry Flint, Mark Levin Lane, Wesley Swearington were partners in honeypotting non-believers of the Warren Report and JFK, as was William F. Buckley. He's partners too. And I'll bring in another person, David Atlee Phillips, a career CIA employee who also was stationed in Mexico City at a different time. And David Atlee Phillips was the control agent for 90 days for Lee Oswald, leading up to Lee Oswald's murder. Probably at Parkland Hospital is where Lee Oswald was murdered. I don't believe he was murdered at the Dallas Police Department garage. I don't believe that. I think that was a staged shooting, and then he was disappeared or killed other places. You should know that that Jonestown People's Temple Agricultural Project was on over 6,000 acres of land controlled by Union Carbide, and it was all run out of Georgetown, Guyana, British Guyana. And that is CIA, State Department, British intelligence, and American military intelligence approved. And you should know that the Latter-day Saints Mormon Church has offices in Georgetown, just like People's Temple did. And you should know that the LDS Church moved into Georgetown, Guyana at the exact time that the People's Temple Jonestown event went kibosh. I believe the Mormons moved in 1977 in anticipation of the Jonestown debacle. Anyway, the People's Temple lasted from 1954 to 1978. That's 24 years to be a prisoner dilemma game, pharmaceutical, trauma-based mind control experiment on military property in Northern California at the Greenfield Ranch, at the Scottish Rites Temple in San Francisco. That's Masonic. The People's Temple was a Masonic church with a 501c3 tax exemption. The LDS Church, Mormons, they are a Masonic church founded by 5 Freemasons, Joseph Smith and Brigham Young and 3 other Masons founded in Illinois. And they have Masonic temples with inverted 5-pointed stars for Masonic ritual worship. And the LDS Church has been around since April 6th, 1830, making it 194 years old. And they have approximately 7 million LDS members. It's under 7 million. Anyway, People's Temple, don't really know how many members they have. They claim 900 people were killed at the Jonestown debacle, which was, again, misquoted by the media. It's the People's Temple Agricultural Project. That's what it says on the sign over the front gate. It's on Union Carbide property of over 6,000 acres of land. You should know that they had a port facility that was constructed there on the river. The river is called the Ketuma River, and the Port Authority is Port Ketuma, the Ketuma River. And within a few miles of that was where Leo Ryan, Bob Brown, Don Harris of NBC, an Emmy Award fake reporter, and Gregory Robertson were all shot to death, along allegedly with Patricia Parks. There were 5 people killed at Jonestown that were members. They were all members of the CIA, every one of them. Leo Ryan, Don Harris in the fake CIA media, Gregory Robertson, Patricia Parks, and Bob Brown, all military intelligence operatives. And that's who got killed. And Jackie Spear, that's not a real name, right? Jackie Spear, her name is Karen Lorraine Spear. She was only 28 years old, and she was wounded, but she didn't die. And that tells you something. She wasn't on the list, because the paramilitary people who used semi-automatic rifles to kill Congressman Leo J. Ryan and Don Harris and Bob Brown and Gregory Robertson and Patricia Parks, they were on the kill list and they got killed. You know how easy it would be to kill Jackie Spear? They didn't want to kill her. They didn't want to kill her. It's just like Cielo Drive. They killed Sharon Tate. They killed Abigail Folger. They killed Wojtek Frykowski. They killed Stephen Parent because he's trying to flee the property. And they killed Wojtek Frykowski, and they killed Tom Coomer, Jay Sebring. But they did not kill William Garrickson, and they did not kill 3 dogs. And over at Waverly, they killed Lino LaBianca. They killed his wife, Rosemary, but they did not kill his 2 dogs. Deliberately on purpose. That's what they did at Jonestown. They only killed the people they wanted to kill. Hey, Mark Levin Lane was at Jonestown, and he didn't get killed. Mark Lane was Jim Jones's attorney, and he was present at the People's Temple in Guyana when the so-called mass suicide happened. And Jackie Spear will tell you there was no suicides at Jonestown, mass murder. We don't have a correct number on that. You know, I've heard 400, I've heard 900, I've heard 1,200, I've heard over 200 children's bodies never identified. So we don't really know exactly what happened other than it was a military intelligence operation. And Mark Levin Lane was present during it. So Mark Levin Lane is the attorney for Jim Jones. He becomes the attorney for James Earl Ray, who was the scapegoat for the Martin Luther King killing. He becomes the critic of the Warren Commission for JFK. Then Mark Levin Lane works with Larry Flint of Hustler Magazine, along with Wesley Swearington of the FBI, to honeypot people that don't believe in the JFK narrative. Those are 4 separate episodes that Mark Lane is involved with. JFK, Jonestown, Martin Luther King, honeypotting for the killers of JFK, and then, you know, going on and working with William F. Buckley to create this illusion that Mark Lane is on a different team than is William F. Buckley of Yale University. They're on the same team. All of them are. Oliver Stone went to Yale University. William F. Buckley went to Yale University. Sean Stone went to Princeton. Jimmy Stewart went to Princeton. John Dulles of the State Department for President Eisenhower went to Princeton. Alan Dulles, director of CIA, went to Princeton. Brooke Shields went to Princeton. Lyle Menendez went to Princeton. The son of Jose Menendez never went to Calabasas High School, but he did go to Princeton. Eric Menendez went to Calabasas High School and 1 year at Beverly Hills High School. You should know that the Hells Angels, the Mongols, the Satan slaves, the straight Satans are all created by military intelligence. They were all created fairly close to World War II ending. Hells Angels created in 1948. The Mongols didn't get created till 1969. The Church of Satan was created April 30th, 1966. The Church of Synanon was created in 1958. We have the Fountain of the World Church, created by Krishnaventa in 1948. And we have the People's Temple, ran 1954 and 1978. The Temple of Set started in 1975 with Michael Aquino. It's still around. Church of Satan, founded by Harold Levy, that the media wants you to think is Anton LaVey. There is no Anton LaVey. He's got a daughter named Zena Schreck. She married Nicholas Schreck, then she divorced him. She's supposedly a high priest at the Temple of Set. Temple of Set's still in business, so since 1975. So it's coming up on, what would that be? Coming up on 50 years old, right? Not quite, 49 years. Church of Satan lasted 54 years. Supposedly, Church of Satan has been moved to Hell's Kitchen in lower New York City, lower Manhattan. So Church of Satan is still in business. Temple of Set is still in business. Hell's Angels is still in business. The Mongols is still in business. The Latter-day Saints Mormon Church is still in business. But we said goodbye to the Church of Synanon, 1958 to 1991, 33 years, 33 years. You should know that William F. Buckley's Firing Line show, it aired something to the order of 1,504 episodes over 33 years. 33 years, Masonic. 33 years of William F. Buckley on television. 33 years of Church of Synanon, which preyed on alcoholics that would sign 2-year enslavement contracts. People's Temple is an enslavement cult. LDS Church is a sex, Satan, ritualistic abuse prison. It's a prisoner dilemma game. Mormon Church is a prisoner dilemma game. You should know that if your name is Brigham Young and you have 57 children and you abandon them and don't provide any parenting, that is a form of child abuse. And if your name is Joseph Smith and you're 38 years old and you're busy fleecing people for looking glass magic, you are performing child abuse by abandoning your children. And if you are a bishop in the Mormon Church and you lock your children out of the house till 6 o'clock every night, you are performing child abuse. And Mormons like to pull out of their belt like a dagger this penitent privilege so that they don't have to speak with law enforcement regarding all the abuse to children going on in their wards, which is rampant. Anyway, that's my video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. We have a situation here, people, where we have Oliver Stone, Mark Lane, David Atlee Phillips, Anton LaVey, Howard Levy, is where we have Michael Aquino, where we have William F. Buckley. These are all people who are influencers, and they all work for the military intelligence. So they should be ignored and deleted. And in the today, in the here and now, you have Rachel Madcow, and you have Tucker Carlson, and you have Anderson Cooper, and you've got Joe Rogan and Alex Jones, and they're all working for military intelligence also. Just like Howard Stern is, just like Neil Young is, just like Gene Simmons of KISS is, just like Ellen DeGeneres and Oprah are, just like The Rock, Mr. Steroid Rock, he's working for military intelligence, along with Arnold Schwarzenegger, a steroid bikini-wearing beauty queen, muscle boy, Arnold, screw your freedom, Schwarzenegger, living in a Jewish colony known as Pacific Palisades. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
This guy's hilarious. Anyway, that was very interesting. He speaks about Richard Gage, and he's even posted on the ADL, the anti sorry, I'm getting distracted. The Anti Defamation League, and I'm just going to share what they're posting. Okay, so in early September 2021, AE 9/11 Truth's board voted to remove Richard Gage from his position as the organization's CEO, citing controversy generated by his off-mission COVID-19 related comments that were highlighted in a Slate article about Spike Lee's 9/11 documentary, NYC Epicenter's 9/11 2021 and a half. Lee recut the documentary's final episode following public backlash for providing a platform for AE 9/11 Truth in the show, removing all footage featuring the organization. Gage plans to remain involved in the 9/11 Truth movement, writing in an online post that he will never quit as a 9/11 Truth leader, and that he is not in competition with AE 9/11 Truth. And he has since launched his own website. I've taken a look at it. And so essentially, because he's talking about and just providing expert accounts and footage and evidence, he's getting slandered, I will say, because there's nothing in here, like there's no quotes of anything that he said that has been anti-Semitic at all. And they're only saying that because unfortunately it's naming people that are within that community that were also involved in 9/11. There were other organizations and groups as well. This was, a foreign interference and deep state actors that were involved. And so anytime people speak the truth, they got called a racist or a fascist or an anti-Semite, et cetera, misogynist, pseudoscientist. But I'm going to share that video tomorrow because he did put together explosive evidence, is what they call it, and it's experts who speak out. So it's explosive experts, from what I recall. It's structural engineers. It's scientists. It's people that, anyway. There's so many different levels to this, and I believe he calls out, anyways, multiple different groups. So on that note, I will leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.